Hello once again and welcome to the Prince Magnum channel where hot rodding and romance do coexist. I'm your host Prince Magnum. Welcome once again to Off the Chain and another Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild video game theory. In this theory, we're going to tackle a subject that has been done by a few other YouTube channels that I've seen. They asked the question, could Link have won the original fight against Calamity Ganon? And the answer is actually yes. These channels said no, I say yes. And what I'm going to actually do in this video is set out to prove that it was possible. So, if you will, sit back, relax, and let's take a close look at how Link could have won the original fight against Calamity Ganon. Okay, folks, for this particular game theory, we're going to have to kind of follow the backstory. First and foremost, I think it's safe to say that there was a contingency plan. And you can actually find the contingency plan in-game. There was a contingency plan in place if the champions, Zelda and Link, were unsuccessful in stopping Calamity Ganon. If anything went sideways, there has to be a contingency plan of some sort. So, in order to actually figure out if Link could have won the initial fight against Calamity Ganon, we need to actually find if there was a contingency plan. And the answer, again, there was a contingency plan, and it was actually a very, very good plan. It's just one of those things. The game doesn't actually come out and say it, but it implies it. It implies that there was a contingency plan. And again, it was a very good plan. So let's begin with where, from this particular moment forward in going from Kakariko Village, going from Mount Lanayru to Kakariko Village to the castle, and then Link and Zelda figuring out, how bad it really was. Now, the first thing that we need to address is this is where the flashback happens. So we need to get to Kakariko Village from this point, and this is very important why we're going to take a look at getting from this point to where Kakariko Village is, because there's actually a fork in the road. A very, very, very important point that is crucial to this particular theory. And if you didn't catch the caption at the beginning of this segment, I did speed up the time, of the video. Basically, it looks like Link is really flying along but what I'm actually trying to do is shorten the amount of time, because this is going to take a minute to really explain. So, again, if you've kept up with the game, if you've played the game, beaten the game, whatever, this will look nothing new. But basically, this is the Lanayru Promenade. I have no idea what it was for. It is pretty neat to see in-game, so if you've never actually been to that particular point, you definitely want to get... There's some stuff over here that you need to unlock, and obviously, if you've got to get that one particular dragon that comes through, definitely... you'll need to come over to this area. It's the easiest spot to get that particular dragon that comes around the Spring of Wisdom. So, now that we've addressed that, again, what we're going to be doing is going from one point to the other. And of course, because, I had actually just dealt with the Blood Moon, I'm going to have to deal with a lot of enemies along the way. Another reason why I had to speed up the time of the video. Because it seemed like every time I turned around, I was getting jumped. But I'm like, I am not going to reshoot this video. I spent too much time on it by this time. So, again, we're now getting ready to exit the Lanayru Promenade. Okay? And when we go into this particular canyon, one of the first things that we're going to need to know is, again, there is a fork, kind of a fork in the road. Now, there's no actual road that leads to the right. It's kind of a giant field, but there's something important that needs to be addressed about that particular field because it is part of the contingency plan. But if you go ahead and turn to the left, as we have just done, it takes you up right next to one of the ferries that helps you upgrade your armor in game, and of course that puts you pretty much right next to Kakariko Village. Now again, this is super important to remember, because if we go right, it takes us to an actual contingency plan, part of the contingency plan, if things went sideways. Again, I'm pretty sure the King of Hyrule was smart enough to understand that if his daughter was unable to unlock her sealing power abilities to help seal away Gannon, because it takes both her and Link, if she was unable to unlock those abilities, there had to be a contingency plan of some sort to not only to try to recapture the kingdom, but also because, he is a good father. We do read regularly about that in game when you get inside of Hyrule Castle and you read his journal. We know full well that how much he loves his daughter Zelda. So now that we are in Kakariko Village, again, this is super important because where we are going next is all very much a part of the contingency plan. So let's take a look at the map. Right there, we're looking at Kakariko Village, and if you look at where that little leaf is kind of a broken road, or if you will, a pathway that takes you to kind of this fork in the road where you could get a really good look at the castle. Well, what's so special about that fork in the road is it's a readout post, okay? A readout post of some sort. What's special about that readout post? Well, we'll talk about that readout post because, again, there's another fork in the road. So now we've explained how, because when you look at the map, it doesn't really give you an exact way to do it, but how Link and Zelda got from, from Kakariko Village to the castle so quickly. Okay, folks, at this stage in the game, what we're doing right now is we're playing detective. We have to figure out once we hit this road, we go up to, we go up a couple of forks in the road, going to our left in both cases, and it takes us to that readout post. Again, we're just playing detective. And again, if you did not catch in the earlier stages of the video, I have sped up the video time because of the fact that I just dealt with the blood moon and I was not going to reshoot this again. So now we're at the readout post. You can kind of see the remnants of what was left of said readout post. It pretty much is right. I mean, you're in a good range where you could see what's happening at the castle, and I'm pretty sure, even though the game doesn't mention it, by now soldiers and people around Castle Town are trying to escape the return of Gannon. They're trying to get as far away from the action as possible. So at this point in the game, I think it's safe to say that Link and Zelda cannot get close enough to the castle. So, again, where you see the leaf on the map, that's the readout post, okay? So those leaves are super important. Now, there's kind of like this bow and arrow icon on that map that we looked at before. You're welcome to backtrack and take a look at that. But that's where one of the flashbacks happens. That's why I marked it, because that particular flashback kind of helps us follow the path of where Link and Zelda went next. Because obviously they can't get close enough to the castle to have any effect. I mean, by this time, it's probably even safe to say that they know what happened to the Divine Beast. So, again, at this point, we need to follow where they were trying to make their escape. Now, I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that if they went ahead and turned around and just went back towards Kakariko, the corrupted guardians would have been able to track them. So they need a buffer zone. All right. So again, if you've not kept up with the game, this is the flashback that I had marked on the map with that bow and arrow icon. To explain this flashback, what we're seeing, what we're actually experiencing in game, when Link remembers this, Zelda, Link and Zelda are on the run, okay? They know they have to get as far away from, the epicenter of Ganon's return as fast as possible. So, in their escape, Zelda finally has this meltdown. Link goes to her and comforts her. And I think everybody can understand, granted she's 17 years old, and you kind of get the feeling in game that she's as tough as she is, but I mean, she just lost her 4 friends who were operating the Divine Beast, and she couldn't even get close enough to save her father. I think we all can kind of understand her emotions at this point. But again, this is pivotal moments that kind of lead us to what the contingency plan was and how it went sideways, which again we kind of addressed in another video. Why the contingency plan went sideways. We know that Link got reckless because of the grief of losing his fiancée, Mipha, who is operating the Divine Beast. It kind of looks like an elephant, if I remember, Divine Beast Ruta. Okay? So, again, we're now trying to get to, we're following the river line, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to stay off the main roads as much as possible. There's a particular reason why they need to stay off the main roads as much as possible, because that's where the Guardians are going to be trying to track Link. Okay? Again, right in behind me is pretty much, you could get a good look at the castle. You could see how close the Malice is, which, again, another YouTuber did cover what Malice is, and he did so great of a job, there's no sense in me attempting to cover it, because he did 1,000 times better than I could do. But along this way, there are particular buffer zones, if you will, that kind of help us understand that there was contingency plans they were already following the contingency plan to get from one point to another, and it was to slow down the Guardians so Link could mount a counterattack. Okay? And again, there was also a contingency plan to save Princess Zelda. The king had already done his job as not only a good ruler of Hyrule, but also to protect his daughter. He was a very good father. And again, you can read about this in game. Super important to understand this, because again, this tells you everything you need to know about the contingency plan. Again, I want to also reiterate that along the way, there was a lot of fighting. So again, I sped up the time, but I did, I did my best to kind of speed up the time, because this is already getting to be a super long-winded video. Now that we're getting close to a particular buffer zone, we have to pass Riverside Stable, but up ahead is a particular buffer zone, the first of the buffer zones to slow down the Guardians. Okay? I think it's safe to say that the soldiers there were not ready for the Guardians, but it was the first in the buffer zone against Calamity Gannon. They didn't know what they were going to be up against, but it is the first in the zones. Okay? They're just meant to slow down, to slow the advance of anything that could be on the tails of Link and Zelda. Now, the game kind of makes this a footnote, but it is important to remember. Link's father is if I remember correctly, is a captain in the Royal Guard. Link was a member of the Royal Guard as well. We learn a little bit more about this when we dive deep into the lore of the game. But knowing this, not only is Link an accomplished swordsman that gets him noticed for being selected to the Master Sword, but it would also give him the chance to learn tactical skills, strategy skills, things that a commander would need to know. Because at this point, in getting away from, it's safe to say that Link now is going to have to take command of Hyrule's army. Hyrule does have forts that are designed to keep out invaders. We kind of briefly talked about this in another theory video, but now we're going to actually have to touch base on that fact. We're going to because we just got through coming by one of the outposts, but now we're going to have to pass through Twin Peaks, and at this point in the video, I'm just trying to say F it, and we're just going to go ahead and kind of warp to the other side of Twin Peaks, and go to the spot where one of the buffer zones is. But bear in mind, this particular fort is facing towards the sea. It was designed to keep out invaders. It was not really exactly designed to keep out Guardians, but it is part of the contingency plan. I think the soldiers there and the commanders that were there at these ruins of this fort were already briefed on what their job was going to be. They knew it was going to be rough, but they're soldiers. That's the way it works. They know their job's going to be a tough one. They know that they're almost cannon fodder to whatever could be on the tail of Link and Zelda. So at this particular point, this is where Link falls. We know that Link turns reckless. He had just lost his fiance, so he kind of fell through on his part of the plan. Emotion took over. But this is where the contingency plan was supposed to pick up and would have allowed Link to actually implement this plan. So from here, we're actually going to take a look at the contingency plan. Alright folks, we're taking a quick look at the map. Remember, if Link had not turned reckless, this would have been the plan. Okay, and it would have been a very good plan, and it probably would have worked. It's one of those plans, it probably would have worked if Link had not gotten reckless over the loss of his fiancée, Mipha. So the first thing we've got to do is go back to that that fork in the road where the Reed Outpost is. Where Link and Zelda, were able to see what was going on at the castle and at Castle Town, and to kind of get an update that they needed to flee the area. So that's where we're going to head now. Now, this fork in the road is super important because Link and Zelda in the contingency plan needed to get to Kakariko Village and talk to Impa. We'll talk more about why they needed to speak with Impa, because there was more to this plan. But let's talk about Link's part in the plan next. Link, all he had was the Master Sword. He had no special armor, and he had no shield. That's super important. A shield would have allowed him to deflect the blast back. Actually, if you dive into the backstory of the game, that Link was noticed to be selected to be selected by the Master Sword because he was able to deflect a blast back using a pot lid, from a rogue guardian. So now that we're at Akala Citadel, this citadel was designed again to keep out invaders, another fort to keep out invaders. But this is the point where Link is supposed to basically mount his counterattack. This particular fort has something that I have never seen in a Zelda game. It has cannons. So this should tell you that the fortifications here was super powerful, and defense forces would have been strong enough to mount a decent counterattack. But because Link was not there to help take control of the army, they did not have their powerful leader to help kind of mount that counterattack. Okay, no, and to be honest with you, they probably didn't know how bad the battle was going for them, so they were unprepared for the attack. And of course, the Guardians overran them, and the fort is now in ruins. So when you take a look at it from that standpoint, Link would have been able to get the weapons and the armor he would have needed to help fight the Guardians, and he would have had enough backup to actually mount that counterattack and push them back. So now that we've established that, again, this particular fort, this particular citadel, this particular fort is really interesting. It, again, was designed to keep out invaders, but, let me also say that there was another YouTuber that covered this particular citadel. That's how I knew so much about it, because I checked out his video. But this particular fort had, again, technology that I've never actually seen in a Legend of Zelda game, and that technology was cannons. It had black powder cannons, so that's very interesting. Also, it should also be noted that you do find black powder kegs throughout the game, which you could use, fire arrows, bomb arrows, whatever, to blow them up and take out enemies. Okay, so very interesting. Good stuff to know. That basically, if you spend enough time in game, you kind of start really get to play detective, which again, I don't mind doing. It wouldn't be the first time I've got to play detective. So again, a good look at the castle, designed to keep out invaders, but was a good standing point for Link to get exactly what he needed, which of course would have been a good shield, some good armor, and he would have had reinforcements to mount that counterattack. So there's your contingency plan on Link's part. But in a moment, we're going to cut away and talk about why it was so important that Zelda get to Kakariko Village. Okay, folks, let's go ahead and return to Kakariko Village, and we've gone ahead and used the fast travel, if you will, and dropped in at the at that shrine, and we're going to make our way past up the Great Ferry again. Again, the Great Ferry is one of the key players that you need to increase the power of your armor, get all 4 unlocked, and you can really just boost the capabilities of your armor. But we need to go back to that fork in the road that connects into the Lanayru Promenade. Remember that canyon I talked about earlier in the video? There's a field that kind of connects into that area. This field is super important to this video game theory. It was important that Link get Zelda to Kakariko Village, because Zelda was then supposed to go with Impa to a hideout of sorts. This hideout is kind of on the other side of this field, and this field is actually, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot down here, but there's a lot more than you think. There's plenty of wild game, plenty of things that you can gather up, plenty of areas to fish. There's even a couple of shrines in the area, so there's plenty of resources to live in the area for a while if you're the hunter-gatherer type. And of course, it's right in behind Kakariko Village, so that means that Kakariko Village could even act as a third buffer zone, kind of slowing down any advancements. And of course, you can actually see the Zora domain not too far from that, so there's plenty of protection surrounding this area. And if you go enough far enough in behind this hideout area, you'll actually find a raft, which I believe has been there pretty much the whole time. And the purpose of this raft is obviously to get Princess Zelda close enough to the castle so she can rejoin the army in that counterattack, whenever it might be. And you can actually get a good view of the castle from it, so you would be able to see when a counterattack is actually happening. Along with the remains of this particular base is actually overrun by Lysophoes, but you can actually see a lot of the same construction that goes into many of the ruins of Outpost all around Hyrule, and in some of the other military installations around Hyrule Castle, Castle Town, and places like that, which we're actually viewing right now. So this was, in essence, a Princess Zelda and Impa's hideout if things went sideways in when Calamity Ganon made his return. So there you have it. Pretty awesome stuff. So again, I know this was a long-winded video, and I do apologize, but when you're playing detective like this, there's a lot of information and a lot of evidence that you have to throw at the public. So of course, yes, it took a long time. So here in just a moment, we're going to cut away, kind of do a closing segment, and do our usual outro. Okay, folks, that brings us to the point where we have to ask the question, could Link and Zelda have won the original fight? Well, I think it's safe to say, whether you think they could have or they couldn't have, I think it's safe to say that they would have fared better if the contingency plan had went off without a hitch. But like any, any military engagement, the plan falls apart as soon as the shooting starts. Anybody who's ever been, who's been in our military and engaged in, had to engage in battle, they'll tell you exactly just that. So, that being said, I'm not knocking any other YouTubers that have done videos on this. I'm just throwing my own personal take on it. So, that brings us to a good stopping point. As usual, if you have any comments, maybe you have a viewpoint of your own because you played the game, by all means, leave a comment in the box below. If I get enough of an outcry, I might take a close look at those comments and maybe do a video on it. So you yourself will have your own thoughts and feelings put into the Maverick Nation. If if you're not subscribed to the Prince Magnum channel, now would also be a great time. Again, I keep saying that because we continue to keep trying to put out content for everyone. A little something on the Prince Magnum channel for everyone. Okay? So, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon, because unfortunately the subscribe button doesn't mean as much as it used to here on YouTube. At this moment, I would also like to throw out a special shout out to my dear friend, Choice Games. He loves it whenever I do kind of detective work, whether it's in video games or in real life. He loves that detective work that I do so much, whether it's on urban legends or just stories in general. He really gets a kick out of that detective work. So Choice, thank you for asking me to continue to show off my detective skills that I picked up over the years, because I have an inquisitive mind, and you really like pushing me to do that. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart that you continue to push me to put out detective content, if you will, whether it's again off the chain or look into our past, or even in the automotive world, or even going into alternate media. Choice Games really pushes that. I'd also like to take a moment and thank these fine folks right here. These folks here are just hardworking cogs within the Maverick Nation. They continue to, push me to put out the best possible content that I could do with no questions asked. These people continue to ask me to do better videos every time you turn around. And they themselves are content creators, and some of them are also live streamers. So check these fine folks out. Good people all around. And that brings us to one of my favorite spots where I get to say some really important stuff to whoever might be watching, and that is, get out there and work on a project. I don't care what it is, just do something with yourself. Remember, idle hands and a creative mind go together like oil and water. If you have a sweetheart, sweep them off their feet and do something special for them today. And as always, for all of you out there, if no one out there has told you that they love you today, Prince Magnum does. God bless you, and have a happy 24. Thank you.
You done messed up, Aaron. Now take your ass on down to Oshag Hennessy's office right now and tell him exactly what you did. Get out of my goddamn classroom before I break my foot off in your ass. Insubordinate and churlish.